So thank you all for being here. This is week 4 of a series we've been in, and the title today is simply Freedom in America or Freedom in Christ. And we are going to be all over the Bible, of course, but we're gonna focus on the primary text is going to be Jeremiah 7, kind of between verses 1 and 20. But we're going to do things a little differently this week. Instead of me reading a whole bunch of text and then referencing it later, we're just going to kind of infuse it as we go along. But I do want you to make some notes. So these various scriptures that I mentioned, I can't tell you what to do. I can't make you do anything. But I think it would be great if you were to, write it down and maybe read them in context as part of your devotion and study this week. But that is totally up to you. I just want to encourage you to do that. So I don't know what kind of shows I watch. I watch all sorts of shows because I don't really care much for TV, so it takes a lot to really get my interest. But it's just kind of a thing that I, started watching TV a lot more when with Melody because there were times when that was our only time together out of the craziness of the day. And yeah, there's some sci-fi shows that come on from time to time, and some of them are just out there and weird, and some of them are, they've got a pretty good story to go along with it, and it's almost believable enough that it's an interesting show. So watch those kind of shows, and many of them have a time traveling theme in there, like Doctor Who and The Flash and Quantum Leap and these. And one thing I noticed was no matter how history bends, whether it's a time traveling, whether it's a ripple in time, whether it's an alternate universe, the same people generally are depicted as making the same choices. The same people who are generally good people are good in those alternate universes. The ones that are not in the alternate universe. And it's not just fiction, because that's historical also. The adage that victors write history, and that if you look at actual history, if you want to know where you're going, look at where you came from. Israel, repetitive history we know about in the Bible, and then it continued, past the written times of the Bible. The Empire of Rome, Germany, and yes, America too. It's different empires, but it's the exact same set of mistakes. I don't know if y'all ever watched the show Quantum Leap, but and I haven't seen the new one. It's now on Netflix, but I remember the original ones. And the setting was basically there was a guy that was a time traveler of sorts. He went to all these alternate universes or alternate Earth times or whatever, and it was this physics, scientific something or other, and it's like the triple in time. Well, however he was doing it, I don't think he even knew why he was doing it. It just sort of started happening. But he would appear in this new world as this other person. Sometimes it's a white male, sometimes it's a black male, sometimes it's a female, and on and on and on. And one time it was a black infant. And it's because at that moment in time, his job is to change history, so that these people avoid dying or, whatever it happens to be. And, they dealt with a whole lot of other social issues and that kind of thing. But the other thing he did every time he woke up in this new world, once he got his mission done, because a lot of times he would then be there in the middle of gunfire or something. So anyway, after his mission was done, he would always go back home. He would always go and look and see if he was home, if that was his timeline, every single time. And every single time, the house was the same, the street was the same, a few little differences. There was one episode where they didn't have electricity as we know it. It was just these energy balls that powered. So, I mean, those little things are different based on how that society came. But for the most part, same stuff. Said he'd always go, well, there's one episode. He goes home. First thing he does is he opens the fence, a little picket fence there, and it didn't squeak. And he did not go inside because he knew it was not his right timeline. Well, it turns out his dad just happened to fix that squeak and he was in the right timeline, but he totally messed out. He did not even know because of that. So there are these little things that are different, but for the most part, we generally end up, in the same place. The well, anyway, enough about the show. I thought it was a pretty good show, but Quantum Leap,
Yeah.
yeah, Quantum Leap. So, but anyway, they most of the time they're doing the same thing. And it seems to be since the beginning of humanity, we continue to repeat these same patterns. So the series that we've been in is called What Kind of Kingdom Are You Building? Or shortly is Kingdom Building. So the first week we looked at 1 Samuel 8 and Israel demanding a king, and kind of how that turned out. And they demanded a king because they want to be like the world. And then the next week we're looking at what kind of kingdom are you building? So the second part of that 1 Samuel passage, that they got what they wanted, but now what? We got all the stuff that we wanted. These are the consequences that we willingly accepted. Now what? So then we flipped it a little bit. We were looking, or last week we looked at how what we do mirrors the king, whether it's good or bad. So that was Galatians 3 or Colossians 3 and Galatians 5. And this week we are in Jeremiah. And out of Jeremiah 7, one key thing it says is, you have confused your symbols for salvation. You've turned the temple into a talisman. So we're going to be looking at 7 as our primary text, but of course we'll have context from across the Bible. So Jeremiah 7 opens up. It's so-called Jeremiah's sermon. Excuse me. Jeremiah's temple sermon. Do not trust in these deceptive words. This is the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord. Because in that time, people thought the building itself guaranteed God's favor. They thought being seen there was all that was required for them to be good Jews and honoring Yahweh. But Jeremiah presses them, around 9 and 10, he says, will you steal, murder, and commit adultery, swear falsely, and then come and stand before me in this house, which is called my name, and say, we are delivered, only to go on doing these abominations, only to continue doing these abominations? You see, symbols without obedience are pretty worthless. If we wear a cross, like every time in ministry, I wear this particular cross for a particular reason, but it's the Jerusalem cross. Got it in Jerusalem, as a matter of fact. But if we say that we're a Christian and we throw, say, a random handful of cash that we have, or change that we have in our pocket when they pass the plate, if we go to church every Sunday, it's not the same thing as being a Christian. These symbolic acts are not the same as living a transformed life. Attending church every Sunday does not make you a Christian any more than attending painting classes every day for the rest of your life will make you the next Picasso. You've got to learn from it. You've got to apply what you've learned. We got to really think a little bit differently about church, as a matter of fact. Today, I don't know how history is going to regard us, but I honestly think it is going to say we had a civil war for 50 years over culture and social justice. Christians, not talking about the society and community, I mean just the Christian church. We can't decide and agree on things from the same Bible. So I'm not really sure why we keep fighting with the world about having our say and our way. We fight these cultural battles, the nativity scenes on government property, the 10 Commandments plaques being displayed in churches or courtrooms or wherever, Merry Christmas versus Happy Holidays. But at the same time, we outsource kingdom work. And we're hearing some motions now, Louisiana and I think one other state, they are tackling this age-old debate that's been going on for decades, off and on, throughout all these times. The 10 Commandments must be displayed in school, because that's when our nation changed, when we took that away. Prayer must be mandatory in school because, well, we were great until they took that away. And I suspect this year, in this particular season that we are in, we're going to see a renewed fight over nativity scenes in public squares and courthouse lawns and, all the places. But this renewed interest lately has very little to do with the revival of the church, and it has more to do with political winds and society shifting and their influence. Sometimes it's popular to be a Christian, so you want to lean into, I'm an evangelical Christian. Other times it's so polarizing. Well, that's, my faith is not really a matter of this conversation. We want to shy away from it depending on how the winds are shifting. Sometimes in business, sometimes as politicians, sometimes, just in other places that we go. But isn't it amazing how we are so influenced by these things? It shapes, it changes the way we do things, and we keep giving them more of our work to do. But then we wonder, why isn't anything changing? Why are people still dying in the streets? Why are there still people hungry? And as y'all have heard me say a million times, there are three things that nobody should be in America by choice, unless it's by choice. Unless it's by choice, three things people should never be in this great nation of ours: homeless, hungry, and illiterate.
Yeah.
We proportionally spend the highest amount on food. We have the highest portions of food. We have the highest amount of waste of food. We spend the most per capita on education, on the back end, investing in teachers and so forth. And then, of course, investing in curriculum and, the schools and all that kind of stuff. And there are so many vacant buildings and vacant lots and places, that people can live. There is no reason anybody in this country should be homeless, hungry, or illiterate unless they choose to be. And, this country we live in, we have that freedom to not. So why hasn't anything changed? Well, something has changed. Do y'all know what's changed? Can you guess what I'm going to say?
People. I don't.
Church.
Oh, the church.
The church is what's changed.
Oh.
I mean, yeah.
Because they used to do it back 40, 50 years ago. They used to help the community.
Right.
They don't do that no more.
Right.
Well, not as much.
The center of the community.
Yeah.
But no longer is it. In fact, if you go into predominantly African American establishments and they recognize you as a minister, they're going to treat you a little bit differently. If you go into predominantly white establishments and you mention that you're a preacher, you're going to get some jokes maybe, but they're not going to preach any differently. Even within our own society and our own community, our reaction to church or ministers or ministry is so very different when we all believe the same thing, mostly. We don't believe exactly the same, but you know what I mean. We believe in the triune God and salvation and Jesus and all those kind of things. Well, these debates are part of the problem because, as you just said, Jackie, it's, it used to be the churches that serve these needs of the least, the poor, the affirmed, the broken. But now it's more worlds. It's more of the world, but it's more governments, more.
Yeah, it's government. It's absolutely government. Government took over where the churches stopped.
Well, I don't think the church has stopped as much as they.
Well, according to what they were doing.
They leaned on the government and said, oh, this will be easier.
Yeah.
Churches like one I served in McDonough said, oh, well, we're going to collect money for the poor, but we're not going to give it to them. We're not going to help them when they come in. We're going to refer them to such and such agency, and we're going to give all this money to this agency to take care of them because, well, we don't want those kind of people here, right? Well, sadly, these debates in mainstream come up most often as a reaction to something else. And that is when we find it convenient to use God's name, maybe to win a political point. Politicians have also leaned on the evangelical vote and the Christian vote, just like it has leaned on the black vote or the suburban women vote. Do you think they care about the people behind those votes?
No.
No, it's about the numbers. Well, God says we're all in the same group. We willingly linger into these separate groups, doing what those groups say those groups like to do and what they should look like. Shouldn't our passion be not the defense of the institution, but rather spreading the gospel?
Yeah, the people.
We've seen this play out in modern times with abortion clinic bombings, with religious right in the political, in a particular political party, the Spanish conquistadors and the warring monks. Violence, hate, submission by force. And are those the ways that Jesus modeled evangelism for us? The sermon title was almost, we got to keep the main thing the main thing. Christianity and nationalism as separate things, but I already used that as a sermon title a few years ago for a whole separate one, so I couldn't use that. But that's kind of the thing. We've got to get back to the main thing. Christianity and Christian nationalism are not the same thing. Being a Christian under God, just because our money says, trust in God, does not mean we're, like special elevated kind of nation that, it's God's country and it's God's nation. Well, the whole world's God's country. But more often, what we see these days is charities and NGOs. They're the ones feeding the hungry. They're the ones that are getting donations from businesses and community members for those, in addition to, of course, government grants and so on and so forth. As I've noted, the last couple 3 years, it is, at least around here, it is more often government buildings and governments that host and open up the warming centers and the cooling centers as just a basic safety, for vulnerable human beings. Social agencies more often house refugees. But you know what? We're busy, church. We are, because we're arguing over online churches, which
Yeah.
is the right one, affirming sin in our statements of faith. And I'm not real sure that we can see how Jesus had that same focus during his time. And yet that's what we do. But just for the sake of an experiment, if you will, let's say that we are a Christian nation. Let's say that we are a Christian nation, just like those Muslim nations are Muslim nations. And let's say we're a Christian nation and we require everyone to follow our rules. Prayer before each meal, prayer if it's like a boarding school, prayer first thing in the morning and at night. And like some Christian schools now, you have the Vespers in the evening and, things like that. Let's say we mandated all that kind of stuff. And that would apply, just like in these Muslim nations, and that would apply to visitors too who are not Christian. We would violate their faith in doing that. But let's say that we had a nation like that. And let's say that we read the Bible. And maybe we just focused on the parts of the Bible that were the life and the times of Jesus in the so-called Christian nation of ours. If we lived this way and we found it in the Bible that Jesus did it, that would be one thing, but that's not how Jesus modeled behavior. We can't force anybody. We can't even force anybody to agree with us, which means, here's the part in the fine print they didn't tell any of us. People are going to offend you. People are going to upset you because you know that they are going to hell. You know that they are living a life that, that does not honor God. It dishonors God. We feel that because of, well, it should make us feel something, but we can't make them change their minds. But it doesn't have to control us either, and we don't have to be hateful about it. But injustice in this nation of ours continues to deepen. Homelessness, 653,100 unhoused people in January, as January 2023, according to the HUD annual homelessness assessment. Food insecurity, 12.8% of U.S. households struggled in 2022, according to the USDA report, September of 2023. Incarceration, the United States has the world's highest rate per capita, and Black Americans are incarcerated nearly 5 times the amount of whites per capita. And that's according to the DOJ Bureau of Justice Statistics in 2022. And the gender gap in 2025, well, according to this, it's 2023, women earn 82 cents per dollar compared to men, according to the U.S. Department of Labor in March of 2023. But by gosh, we are going to clutch our cymbals and do everything but ignore the suffering. We'll do everything, but that suffering, we're just going to ignore it. Well, here's the question. I want to make y'all think today. Maybe upset you. I don't know. I hope I don't upset anybody, but here's the question. If we are truly strong in faith, if we really do have the right answer, if what we believe and interpret from the Holy Bible, we really do believe, would rainbow flags and slavery lessons in schools feel like a tax to us? Is that not any different than our symbols being in the public square by mandate that other people who don't believe are forced to see and listen and not accept, but tolerate, if you will? We can't stand for freedom and liberty as a nation and believe in freedom and eternity through Christianity and then oppress other views that upset us, that we disagree with, that we are just so shocked and offended to read. Some of the debates we've had in the last 5 years have just been things that were not wrong by themselves, but the fear of them were. So that's what turned into all the, let's just say, creative explanations of the things. Why would we let any of those things bother us? If Christ reigns in us, there is no symbol, there is no flag, there is no curriculum that can dethrone him. Only our actions can tarnish the image of Christ in this world. Only our actions. The problem isn't rainbow flags. The problem is the American myth, the belief that Christian dominance somehow equals Christian faithfulness. Somehow we are a Christian nation. Thus, well, God favors and blesses us. So we get really upset when we're attacked because, oh, well, they're attacking Jesus. Conveniently, suddenly, it's all about Jesus with us, but not the way we live our lives. This myth believes that the political dominance will somehow solve all of our church problems. And you know the ones I'm talking about, the only ones the church seems to be so resolute to focus on. That would be, can y'all say it with me? Membership and attendance.
Yeah.
Can y'all guess why those numbers are so important?
Wow, what numbers?
Membership and attendance.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know that the church gets grants, so I don't know how to answer that.
Well, if it's the focus of most churches today, or the number one thing that they're focused on, there must be a reason behind it. Because the more membership you have, the more giving you have, the more attendance you have leads to the more growth, which leads to more money.
Oh, but it's not to give to help the people necessarily.
Well, for a lot of people, yes, but a lot of people, is Sunday morning about worship or Sunday morning the Sunday routine you go through at church?
Social, it's social. They get to see each other, and and it shouldn't be that way. That's
It's
why
a
they
social and it's a routine.
yeah, it's a routine, and that's why
Something
they
to
get
check off their weekly checklist.
donuts and coffee. I could care less if I got donuts and coffee. I want to hear the word.
Right. And fellowship is not bad. It's a good thing. That is
Yeah, it is.
exactly how the early church was formed in the first place. It was house churches and it was fellowship around the table. And there's something magical about being at a table. And I would prefer that format in a church over the format we have now because the pastor is down at the same level as everyone else.
Yeah.
It's a psychological subconscious thing. I get it, but too long. And in our early days as a formalized Christianity, you would have the priest at a platform like 10 or 15 feet high.
Right.
And we've just got to get back down to the basics that we are all the same. But we have to maybe look at church a little bit differently too, because the reason that membership and attendance are so important is, well, the more people you have, the better you look because you're so popular. Everybody's coming to your church. You're the best church. That is the primary thing. It makes you feel good. But the membership is all to do with dollars. More revenue, more revenue, more revenue, which to me sounds a lot more like a for-profit corporation business goals than it does ministry. So where in the Bible, if y'all can find it, let me know this week, where did Jesus speak of temple membership as a sign of your Christianity? He never once addressed the temple, bureaucracy, the hierarchy, nothing. He did, but not like directly, that way. But the kingdom says, 1 John 4:18, perfect love cast out fear. Philippians 4:6 says, do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving.
Sure.
And let your request be made known to God. We can't let these things that are contrary to our beliefs upset us. We can't fight all the time and be so hateful and, so absolute in knowing everybody's story and everybody's situation. We know what the word says. We know what we're supposed to do with it, but we know we weren't forced to do it either. But we have let our church become more like the world to gain favor and status in the world. And this has been history repeating itself over and over and over. So you can look at it like this: the beast versus the kingdom, or you can look at it as the world versus the kingdom, whatever word you want to use. So the world or the beast says, trust in symbols, like Jeremiah 7:4. The kingdom says, be doers of the word, not hearers only, James 1:22. The beast says, faith should be enforced by law. Roman required sacrifice to Caesar. It was the Roman Empire that copied what Egyptians and other civilizations had done, and they elevated the emperor to a god status. So they required the sacrifice to Caesar as a god. Nazi Germany mandated loyalty salutes. In America, we have also mandated symbols. Under God was added to our pledge in 1954. In God We Trust was added to paper currency in 1955, the Eisenhower era. Both as a response to current world events and less to do with the Christology or evangelism. Our way is better. Let's send a message to Russia and the world. Our way is better. Let's make sure it's always in their face. Because, God's going to favor us too. So we're going to win all these wars. But what the kingdom says is, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. 2 Corinthians 3:17. The beast says in Revelation 13:4, strength is dominance. In Mark 10:45, the kingdom says, the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. I wonder how many of us take less from others than we give. Think about that sometime. The beast says religion is empire. Everyone must conform, like Daniel 3:4-6. The kingdom says our citizenship is in heaven, Philippians 3:20. And do not be conformed to this world, Romans 12:2. The beast says prosperity proves God's favor. But Matthew 5:3-5, Jesus said, blessed are the poor in spirit, and so on, and blessed are the meek. Every empire that has believed in the world, the serpent, the beast, has also collapsed in arrogance and judgment. If we look around our nation, our local cultures, like our word last week, the signs of these last days, we could see and interpret our world today as being here now. And in part, we have been so distracted with proving we're right. We've been so busy being first. And we have pursued with every ounce of energy to have what we want when we want it. For all, that's the American dream. But you know what? In the end, we're just a bunch of spoiled brats, just like the Nazis were, just like the Romans were, just like the Israelites were. We've gotten fat with self-pleasure. We have gotten lazy by outsourcing being his hands and feet. And now we think maybe mandating it is going to fix everything. Well, in the end, you know what? What we're doing ain't working. It is time for us to try something different. And that begins with forgetting all that we know. And in all the ways that what we know has been influenced, to think about our national history and our Christian history. It's time that we just drop our biases, drop these facts that we believe, unless we can verify when it happened. Forget all that, kind of reset everything, reset it all. And of course, all the bias resources, get rid of those sources as well. Get rid of those. And we've got to get back to the word. We've got to get back to the basics. We've got to go back to that time when we first met Christ, when we gave our lives to Christ, when we made that decision for Christ. We have to be at that most vulnerable time on our hands and knees, looking up and saying, God, I don't know anything. Tell me what I don't know. Show me where I've been ignorant so I can understand, because I can guarantee you whatever we know is probably wrong in the first place. We've got to go back to the basics of the Bible. It doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't matter what nation you're from. It doesn't matter what language you speak, because all but a handful of languages, there is a version of the Bible. But we have to read it as if it's the first time that we've read it. I have been complicit in my reading over the years, because I'll come through a passage in something else and I know that passage really well, so I just kind of skim over it. What if you read it more slowly? What if you answer the who, what, where, when, why, and how in every verse you were reading? It would take a lot longer to read a passage. But we've got to just get rid of everything else we know and go start over. Not start with a new church or new denomination. I'm not talking that kind of start over, but forget what we think we know and go back to the basics, or prove ourselves right. What your beliefs are, go find them in the Bible. Things that you think happened in, with Daniel or whatever else, go find it in the Bible. And I can promise I can't promise because I can't speak for God, but I'm sure that in doing it that intentionally, the Spirit is going to lead you to insights that you had never gotten before. It's going to lead you to context that you hadn't thought of before. Because have you ever made a copy and then a copy of that copy, and then 10 iterations later it looks like a terrible version of the first original copy? Well, that's what happens when we don't go back to those basics, when we don't validate our beliefs, when we don't go and prove. And what I like to do myself is I like to prove myself wrong. If I am so absolute in something, I'm going to prove myself wrong. And then if I can, I was wrong the whole time. But if I can't, then that reassures me that I do believe that. It's like an affirmation of your beliefs every day. We've got to reboot ourselves so that we put him first in our world's needs, and then our self-pleasures of the world is second. We got to get back to that basic time when we first met Christ. That same renewed passion, that same excitement that I'm free. I'm going to live with Christ Jesus in kingdom, in heaven forever. We need to do the work, not by giving, not by saying words, not by wearing symbols. We don't have to, because they already are. I mean, we see this rise in poverty, we see this rise in crime, and we see all the suffering. So clearly what we're doing is not working. It's time to do something else. Rome persecuted Christians in the beginning, and it was in retaliation of the Jews. It was in retaliation for all the damage that Jesus did to their control over the people, especially the Gentiles. But then later on in Roman history, they co-opted it under Constantine. They mandated everybody had to be Christian, just like everybody had to worship the pagans. Faith became empire. And then, of course, the values of the word were compromised. Germany's Lutheran Church, they fused with Nazism, swapping crosses for swastikas. Bonhoeffer and the Confessing Church are the only group that resisted. They named nationalism as idolatry, and they died protecting the gospel. The Lutherans enjoyed the fame and the fortune and the power for a little while, till justice came. But that's the other thing, is that I think it's easy for us to forget that justice is not ours to give, but God's, and God's alone. And you should read more about what he had to say, Bonhoeffer had to say in the 1934 Barmen Declaration. They took the sheep away from the safe pasture and moved them into this dangerous place. In America, we see vestiges of that. We see people that tend to worship their church or worship their Bible, and there's actual words for it. Bible idolatry is one of them. We drape flags beside crosses as if faith and nation are the same. we'll see coming up soon this week. We'll see these interposed outlines of our nation and perhaps a Christ behind it, pitying us, transposed on this as if to say our nation is the one that God said was so wonderful. So we can keep doing what we're doing and not change a thing because God's got us. I think a lot of us use God's name more in currency and pledges and seeing these kind of displays than we do in our day-to-day lives. This week in particular, we'll see a lot more flags. For some, it brings pride. For others, it brings grief and anger. But either way, we'll see more flags because most of us anyway, will pause this Thursday and remember this terrible thing that happened to our nation on September the 11th. But these we'll see interposed with crosses, as if an attack on one is the attack on the other. But maybe the deeper tragedy is that we've reversed the order. We should live American values second, because we should live our Christian values first. And you know what? If we did this, the world wouldn't need plaques and pledges and crosses on our hats and stuff to know who we are, because it would be so stinking obvious in our behavior. Jeremiah 7:3 says, amend your ways and your deeds, and I will let you dwell in this place. If our culture doesn't look like Jesus, why do we fight so much for these plaques and these symbols instead of living his way? And here's an interesting question I thought of this week. What if, when Christ was on earth, what if he pursued his mission with the same half effort that we give him? Would salvation even be ours today? What if he woke up one day and said, nah, I'm too tired to save people today. I want to go play at the lake. Oh, I had that special concert last night, and I got to have a day off too. Nope, I ain't going to help that person. They're just going to be in the same situation. They don't want to change. I mean, I can understand it when they're kids, but they're just being lazy. They're not worthy of it. It's going to be the same thing. My blessings are more worthy than that. Can you imagine if Christ approached his humanity like we approach our discipleship? Would we even have an Easter to celebrate? There was a song Alanis Morissette, I think it was, what if God were one of us?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And I am so glad when Jesus was on earth, he was not like us in our human form. I mean, he was fully human and fully divine, but he had self-control.
Right. He did not have the attributes that we have. He had the attributes of God.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what we're called. And we cannot be that way, but we can be as close to it as we're capable of being.
Right.
But I am so glad that Christ didn't let any of those things stop him from the work he needed to do. Not only the people while he was here. I wasn't talking only about the crucifixion and resurrection, but also all those talks that he had, all those people that he healed and he saved and he turned away, all that. I mean, I'm so glad he wasn't like us.
Yeah.
So the call is real simple. We've got to stop outsourcing. We've got to stop clinging to myths. We've got to stop defending symbols, and we've got to simply live the gospel. We got to feed the hungry. We got to love our enemies. We've got to do justice, and we've got to walk humbly with your God, like Micah 6:8 says. But if we don't, Jeremiah's words are not just history. They will be a prophecy that foretells where our nation will be and somewhere in the future. So if the empire always tries to swallow faith, then we've got to really ask the question, what is church? It's not a building, it's not a block, it's not a brand, but the church is a people who are set apart.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the direction we're going to be going in the next few weeks. Kind of defining and learning what scripture says, what is church? Because I think we are all doing it wrong. I think our focus and a lot of times is in the wrong areas on the wrong things. And sometimes it's clinging onto something that God did mighty things through. Sometimes God calls us to do things differently. I think we all do it wrong, but I think that in all of our imperfections, together, we can figure it out. And I think we've got to do that. And that kind of goes back to that basic question. So if we want to get back to the basics, well, what is church? So let us reflect, and then I'll close us in prayer.
No pharmacy trips needed. No more waiting rooms. No more expensive vet visits. Give your pet a year of care for less than $100. Visit Dutch.com today.
All right, let us pray. Dear Jesus, thank you so much for loving us. Thank you for your obedience to your call and setting that perfect example of how we are to live. I ask, Lord, that you forgive us for any hate, any bias, anything like that that's in our heart that's, kind of making seeing you and seeing the world as you would want us to see it a little harder to see and a little fuzzier. So help us have a clear view on what you want each of us to do. Let us forget about all these little groups we're in and all these labels and everything else. And instead, God, just look at us as humans and look at you as God who saved our lives, and get back to that basic call of evangelism, sharing your love and also living lives that make us attractive, that people want to know why we're so happy, why we're so full of joy, why we're so forgiving. And let us have that answer because of your redemption. Be with each and every one of us this week as we go about our lives doing the things that we do, and work and the marketplace and the town square and all the places that we go where there are other people, God, and help us shine your light bright and strong and surprise us with it. Let us just Lord, just catch us being good. Just catch us shining your light. Catch us this week, God, loving our neighbors and our enemies. These things we pray in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.